The massive space station hung in the void like a jewel made of metal and light. Nexus Prime had stood at the center of galactic civilization for over 10,000 years, a monument to peace and cooperation among the stars. Today, representatives from 300 different species gathered in its Great Hall for the Millennium Summit, an event that happened once every 1,000 years. Commander Jake Murphy stood near the entrance, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. This was humanity's first invitation to the Galactic Council, their first chance to join the community of intelligent species that spanned the galaxy. He wore his dress uniform, pressed and clean, with the flag of Earth on his shoulder. Beside him stood Dr. Lisa Grant, a scientist with sharp eyes who had learned 5 alien languages in preparation for this day. On his other side was Marcus Webb, head of security, who kept scanning the room with the careful attention of a man who trusted nothing he couldn't see with his own eyes. The Great Hall was enormous, with a ceiling so high it seemed to fade into darkness. Aliens of every shape and size filled the space. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others on 4 or 6 or dozens. Some floated in tanks of liquid, while others were clouds of gas contained in force fields. The air hummed with hundreds of conversations in languages that sounded like music, grinding metal or whale songs. Jake had dreamed of this moment since he was a boy looking up at the stars. Humanity had finally reached beyond their solar system, finally proven they were ready to join the greater universe. He straightened his jacket and prepared to give the speech he had practiced 100 times. But before the formal introductions could begin, a deep silence fell over the hall. Even the translation devices seemed to pause. Every being turned toward the center platform, where a figure was rising from a seat that most thought had been empty for centuries. The Archeon was ancient beyond measure. Its body was humanoid but seemed to be made of living crystal that shifted between colors as it moved. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in the minds of everyone present, bypassing the need for translation entirely. "I must speak before this council recognizes the humans," the Archeon said, its mental voice calm but heavy with warning. "I must tell you what we discovered about them, what we have known for centuries." Jake felt his stomach drop. This was not how things were supposed to go. Lisa grabbed his arm, her fingers tight with worry. Marcus stepped forward slightly, his hand moving toward his sidearm before remembering that weapons were forbidden in the hall. The Archeon continued, its crystalline form glowing brighter. 500 of your standard years ago, we sent scouts to observe the developing species on the 3rd planet of the star you call Sol. We watched them during what they call their medieval period. We studied their nature, their habits, their way of thinking. What we found terrified us. Murmurs rippled through the assembled species. The Velkari representative, a tall being covered in blue scales, made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. Terrified? By these primitives? They still use chemical rockets and split atoms for power. They have not even left their own star system permanently. The Archeon turned its faceted head toward the Velkari. You misunderstand the nature of danger. The humans possess a combination of traits we have never seen in any other species. They adapt faster than any being should be able to adapt. They are curious to the point of self-destruction, willing to die just to know what lies beyond the next horizon. When faced with impossible odds, they do not surrender. They cannot surrender. It is not in their nature. Jake listened, unsure if he should feel proud or insulted. The Archeon was describing humanity like they were some kind of disease or natural disaster. Furthermore, the Archeon continued, they possess a tribal loyalty that scales upward. They fight among themselves constantly, divided by invisible lines and abstract concepts. But the moment an outside threat appears, they unite with a speed that defies reason. We watch them go from warring kingdoms to a unified planet in less than a single generation, when they thought beings from beyond their world might exist. The Krenth Empire's military commander, a being that looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard, stood up from his seat. His translator box rumbled with his deep voice. If they are so dangerous, why did you not eliminate them when they were primitive? Why allow them to develop to this point? The Archeon's colors shifted to something darker. Because we are not murderers of children. We do not destroy species for what they might become, but we are also not fools. We are warning you now. When humanity reaches the stars in force, when they spread across the galaxy with their stubborn will and endless creativity, you will not be able to stop them. No one will. Jake decided he had heard enough. He stepped forward, his boots clicking on the polished floor. With all respect to the Archeon people, I think you're making assumptions based on old data. Humanity has changed. We've learned from our mistakes. We come here in peace, hoping to join the galactic community as equals, to learn from you and share what we know. The Velkari representative made that laughing sound again. Equals? You have 3 ships in your entire fleet that can barely limp between planets. Your weapons are crude, your shields are non-existent, and your culture is barely past its violent adolescence. You are not equals, human. You are children begging to sit at the adult table. Anger flared in Jake's chest, but he forced it down. He had been trained for this, prepared for the possibility that not everyone would welcome humanity with open arms. We may be new to the stars, but we're fast learners. Give us a chance to prove ourselves, the Krenth commander snorted. Prove yourselves? Very well. The Krenth Empire claims jurisdiction over your solar system under Section 47 of the Galactic Territorial Accords. You will submit to our authority and cease all expansion beyond your homeworld. This is not negotiable. The hall erupted in conversation. Some species seemed surprised, others approved with various gestures and sounds. Jake looked at Lisa, who was frantically checking something on her portable datapad.
That section only applies to pre-spaceflight civilizations, she whispered.
We have ships. This doesn't apply to us. Try telling them that, Marcus muttered. The Archeon raised one crystalline hand and silence fell again. It looked directly at Jake with eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. The Council will not listen to our warning. They see your primitive technology and assume you are no threat. They are wrong, Commander Murphy. They are catastrophically wrong. The ancient being turned to address the Council one final time. We, the Archeon people, withdraw from active participation in this Council. We will retreat to our worlds and watch from afar. But know this, when the humans rise, and they will rise, remember that we warned you. Remember that we tried to prepare you. The Archeon began to fade, using some kind of teleportation technology that humans had only theorized about. But before it vanished completely, it appeared next to Jake, moving so fast that Marcus couldn't even react. It leaned close, and Jake heard its voice in his mind, private and clear. When they come for you, Commander, and they will come, remember this. Survival is your birthright. Your species has endured ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have ended any other civilization. You are the children of a world that tried to kill you since the day you climbed down from the trees. Trust that inheritance. Trust what you are. Then it was gone, leaving Jake standing alone with his small delegation, surrounded by hundreds of alien species who were looking at humanity, with expressions ranging from contempt to curiosity to outright hostility. The formal proceedings continued, but Jake barely heard them. The Council granted humanity probationary contact status, which Lisa explained meant they were allowed to exist but not participate. The Krenth commander smiled with too many teeth and promised to visit Earth soon to discuss territorial matters. As they left the hall, Marcus spoke quietly. That could have gone better. Or worse, Lisa added, trying to find some optimism. Jake said nothing. He was thinking about the Archeon's words, about warnings and birthrights and the look in the Velkari's eyes when he laughed at humanity. He was thinking about how it felt to be dismissed, to be called children, to be told that Earth itself was no longer theirs to control. Mostly, he was thinking about what would happen when the Krenth came to enforce their claim, and what humanity would do in response. The answer, he suspected, would surprise the galaxy more than they could possibly imagine. 3 Earth years had passed since the disastrous meeting at Nexus Prime. Humanity had not been idle. The warning from the Krenth Empire had been taken seriously by every government on Earth. Money poured into space development. New colonies sprouted on Mars, on Europa, on Titan, and on a dozen moons and asteroids throughout the solar system. It was not the peaceful expansion humanity had dreamed of, but a desperate rush to spread out, to make sure that no single attack could destroy the entire species. Captain Ben Foster commanded Europa Station, the largest human settlement outside of Mars. The colony was built into the ice moon's surface, with hundreds of people living and working in tunnels carved beneath the frozen crust. Above the settlement, a small defense fleet of 12 ships patrolled the area. They were not military vessels, not really. They were converted mining ships and transports with weapons bolted onto their hulls. Ben knew they would not stand a chance against real warships, but they were better than nothing. He was in the command center, drinking bad coffee and reviewing supply reports, when the alarms started screaming. Amy Chen, his communications officer, looked up from her console with wide eyes. Captain, we have multiple contacts entering Europa space. Large vessels. Military configuration. Ben set down his coffee and moved to stand behind her chair looking at the screen. 20 ships, each one 5 times the size of humanity's largest vessel, had appeared at the edge of their sensor range. The design matched the database they had compiled from the meeting at Nexus Prime. These were Krenth warships. Try to hail them, Ben ordered, keeping his voice steady even though his heart was racing.
Standard greeting.
Let them know we come in peace. Amy worked her controls, sending out the message in multiple languages. For a long moment there was no response. Then a face appeared on the main screen. A Krenth commander with dark scales and eyes like yellow stones. The translator rendered his voice as a deep growl. Human vessel, this is Commander Vorath of the Krenth Empire. You are in violation of territorial law. This system belongs to the Krenth people. You will power down your ships and surrender all personnel for processing. You have one of your standard hours to comply. Ben felt anger rising in his chest but forced it down. Commander Vorath, with respect, this system belongs to humanity. We are a spacefaring species with settlements throughout our solar system. The territorial accords do not apply to us. Vorath's expression did not change. Your interpretation is incorrect. You will comply or we will use force. We need to talk about this, Ben said, trying to buy time. There must be some misunderstanding. Give us a chance to contact our government to work this out peacefully. The Krenth commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. You misunderstand your position, human. You are not our equals. You do not negotiate. You obey. He gestured to someone off-screen and the transmission ended. Ben immediately opened channels to every ship in the fleet and every section of the colony. All hands battle stations. This is not a drill. Amy, get a message to Earth right now. Everything we know about those ships, their weapons, their positions, send it on every frequency. Amy's fingers flew across her keyboard. Sending now, Captain. It'll take about 40 minutes for the signal to reach Earth. Then pray they give us 40 minutes, Ben muttered. They did not. 10 minutes later, one of the Krenth ships fired a single weapon at an unmanned supply freighter that was drifting between Europa and Jupiter. The beam of energy cut through the freighter like it was made of paper. The ship exploded in a silent flash of light. Ben stared at the screen, watching debris scatter across the void. That ship had been carrying food, medicine, and equipment for the colony. But more than that, it had been a message. The Krenth were showing what would happen if humanity did not surrender. Something inside Ben Foster changed in that moment. He had been a military pilot before joining the colonial service, had flown missions in Earth's atmosphere when nations still fought each other over resources and territory. He had seen combat, had lost friends, had learned the hard lesson that sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to punch them in the face hard enough that they remembered it. Amy, send a message to all ships. Tell them to scatter. Use the moon for cover and prepare for guerrilla tactics. We're not surrendering and we're not dying without a fight. His second officer, a young woman named Kelly Price, looked at him with shock. Captain, we can't fight them. They'll destroy us, probably, Ben agreed. But they're going to pay for it. They think we're weak, that we'll just roll over because they have bigger guns. Let's teach them that humans don't work that way. The next 6 hours were the longest of Ben's life. The human ships scattered like Amy had ordered, hiding in the ice geysers that shot up from Europa's surface, using the moon's thin atmosphere and magnetic field to confuse the Krenth sensors. When the alien warships came close, the humans attacked from unexpected angles, firing missiles and energy weapons before disappearing back into cover. The Krenth had better ships, better shields, and better weapons. But they fought like they were following a textbook, with formations and tactics that were probably centuries old. The humans fought like cornered animals, using every dirty trick they could think of. They hacked into Krenth communication systems, sending false orders. They rigged mining charges to explode when enemy ships passed by. They rammed damaged human vessels into alien cruisers at full speed, the pilots ejecting at the last second. Ben coordinated the defense from the colony's command center, watching his small fleet get torn apart piece by piece. But they were taking Krenth ships with them. 5 alien vessels had been destroyed or disabled, and the others were damaged. The Krenth had expected an easy victory. They were learning that nothing involving humans was ever easy. Commander Vorath's face appeared on the screen again, and this time his expression showed something that might have been respect, or might have been anger. You fight well for primitives, but this is meaningless. More ships will come. Your world will fall. Maybe, Ben said, tasting blood from where he had bitten his lip. "But you'll remember us. Every species in the galaxy will hear about this. They'll hear that humanity doesn't surrender, doesn't beg, doesn't break. You wanted to make an example of us? Congratulations. You just did." The Krenth fleet withdrew, pulling back toward the outer solar system. Ben did not believe for a moment that they were leaving for good. They were regrouping, waiting for reinforcements, planning their next attack. But for now, Europa was still free. The colony had survived. The command center was silent except for the quiet beeping of computers and the hiss of air recyclers. Amy Chen looked up from her console, tears streaming down her face. "Message received from Earth, Captain. They got our data. They're mobilizing everything they have. The President has declared a state of emergency." Ben nodded slowly. Around him, his crew looked exhausted, terrified, and somehow proud all at once. They had just fought the first battle between humanity and an alien empire, had held their ground against impossible odds. "Get me casualty reports," he said quietly, "and see if any of our pilots are still out there, floating in suits. I want everyone brought home." Kelly Price was staring at the main screen where the Krenth ships were visible as distant dots against the stars. "What happens now, Captain?" Ben thought about the Archeon's warning at Nexus Prime, about how the galaxy had dismissed humanity as primitive and weak. He thought about the look on Vorath's face when he realized the humans were not going to surrender without a fight. Most of all, he thought about the message that was now traveling toward Earth, carrying data about Krenth weapons, tactics, and technology. "Now," Ben said, "now humanity gets angry, and the galaxy is going to learn what that means." Across the solar system, the message from Europa spread like wildfire. On Earth, President Helen Carter watched the footage of the battle with her cabinet, seeing human ships sacrifice themselves to protect a colony on a frozen moon. Admiral Kevin Ross, head of Earth's small military fleet, studied the data on Krenth technology with the intensity of a man who knew he would need to fight these ships soon. Dr. Nathan Wells, humanity's leading physicist, looked at the readings from Krenth energy weapons and started making calculations. Within hours, he had assembled a team of scientists from a dozen nations, all working on a single goal: learning how to fight back. In Beijing, Moscow, New York, London, and Mumbai, factories that had been building civilian ships started retooling for war production. Recruitment centers opened in every major city, with lines of volunteers stretching around blocks. Humanity's fractured governments came together faster than anyone thought possible, united by the simple fact that an outside force had attacked them without provocation. The Krenth Empire had made a critical mistake. They had assumed that one battle would be enough to break human will, that a show of force would lead to immediate surrender. They had not understood that humanity's history was built on stories of last stands and desperate victories. They did not know about the Alamo or Thermopylae or Stalingrad, or any of the 1,000 times humans had refused to surrender even when defeat seemed certain. Commander Vorath filed his report with the Krenth High Command, explaining the unexpected resistance and requesting additional forces. The Galactic Council met in emergency session 3 months after the incident at Europa. The Krenth Empire had filed a complaint about human aggression, conveniently leaving out the part where they had attacked first. The Velkari Dominion spoke eloquently about the danger of allowing primitive species to threaten the established order. By the end of the session, 23 species had voted to declare humanity a rogue civilization that needed to be contained. 5 species volunteered their fleets for a coalition force. The Krenth, eager to avenge their earlier embarrassment. The Velkari, who saw this as an opportunity to prove their superiority. The Zendari, a silicon-based species who valued order above all else. The Morphean Collective, who fought through swarms of smaller ships. And the Kresh cybernetic beings who considered biological species inferior by nature. The coalition assembled the largest military force seen in the galaxy in over 1,000 years. 300 warships carrying enough firepower to sterilize a dozen planets. They expected the campaign to last 2 weeks at most. Humans would see the fleet, understand they were hopelessly outmatched, and surrender. This was how things worked. This was how they had always worked. No one asked the Archeons for their opinion. They had withdrawn from galactic politics and were not responding to any messages. Some species whispered that they had been right about humanity, but these voices were drowned out by the confident declarations of the coalition commanders. Commander Jake Murphy, promoted to admiral after his handling of the Europa crisis, stood on the bridge of the carrier Independence and watched the coalition fleet approach the solar system. 300 ships against humanity's 50 combat-ready vessels. On paper, it was not even a contest. But paper did not account for what humanity had been doing for the past 3 months. Every factory on Earth and Mars ran 24 hours a day. The asteroid belt had been transformed into a weapons platform, with railguns and missile batteries hidden on thousands of rocks. Every moon, every station, every piece of space debris larger than a car had been turned into part of the defense grid. Dr. Nathan Wells had reverse-engineered the Krenth energy shields, creating a crude but functional version that could be installed on human ships. It burned out after a few hits, but a few hits were better than none. Marine Colonel Ryan Hughes had trained 10,000 soldiers in zero-gravity combat, teaching them tactics that no alien species had ever used because most of them came from high gravity. Worlds where jumping around in 3 dimensions seemed insane, and engineer Sophie Blake had designed a new class of ship, small, fast, cheap to build, and carrying a single weapon. A nuclear-tipped missile with yield enough to crack a moon. The aliens had shields, but shields needed time to recharge. Overwhelm them fast enough, and even the biggest ship could be killed. Jake watched the coalition fleet slow as they reached the edge of the solar system. He knew what they were seeing on their sensors. Human ships, yes, but also the massive defensive network that had been built around Earth and Mars. Every planet's orbit was filled with weapons platforms. Even Venus, hostile and deadly, had automated defenses floating in its clouds. The coalition commander, a Velkari named High Chancellor Trivax, sent a message. His translator made his voice sound smooth and confident. Humans of Earth, you face the combined might of 5 great civilizations. Your resistance at Europa was brave but foolish. Stand down now and you will be allowed to survive as a client species under our protection. Continue this defiance, and your homeworld will be reduced to ash. Jake looked at his communication officer, a young man named Chris Hayes, who had been a civilian pilot before the war. Send our response. Chris nodded and opened the channel. Jake kept his voice calm, almost friendly. Chancellor Trivax, you've come a long way to threaten us. Here's our response. No, we're not surrendering. We're not becoming anyone's client species. If you want Earth, come and take it. But I promise you'll pay for every meter of space. There was a long pause. Jake imagined Trivax sitting in his command ship, probably surrounded by advisors who were all telling him that humans were bluffing, that no species would choose certain death over submission. Very well, Trivax finally said. Let your defiance be a lesson to all who would challenge the established order. The coalition fleet moved forward, and the battle began. It would later be called the Battle of Seoul, and military academies would study it for generations. Not because it was elegant or honorable, but because it was the first time in galactic history that a numerically inferior force defeated a coalition through sheer stubborn creativity. The aliens fought in formation, with their capital ships in the center, protected by screens of smaller vessels. Their tactics were proven over centuries of warfare. They expected the humans to either meet them head-on in a traditional engagement or attempt to flee. Instead, the human ships scattered in every direction. The asteroid field came alive with weapons fire, missiles and railgun rounds pouring into the coalition fleet from unexpected angles. The aliens' shields handled the initial barrage easily, but the attack never stopped. Thousands of weapons firing from thousands of positions, forcing the shields to stay active constantly, draining power from engines and weapons. The Morphean swarm ships broke formation to chase down the human vessels, and that was when the trap sprung. Hidden among the asteroids were mines, simple chemical explosives attached to rocks. As the Morpheans flew past, the mines activated and suddenly hundreds of alien ships were flying through fields of debris and explosions. Their swarm tactics worked when they had clear space. In chaos, they crashed into each other. Jake watched from the Independence as his pilots executed the plans they had drilled for months. Lieutenant Chris Hayes led a squadron of small fighters in a maneuver they called the Wasp Sting. They would rush a capital ship, fire every weapon they had at a single point on the shield, then break away before the aliens could target them effectively. Behind them, another squadron would hit the same spot, and another, and another. Eventually, the shield would fail, and Sophie Blake's nuclear-tipped missiles would finish the job. It was not clean. Human ships died by the dozens. The aliens had better shields, better armor, better everything. But for every human ship destroyed, the pilots made sure to take something with them. Damaged vessels would set themselves on collision courses. Pilots who lost their engines would drift close to enemy ships and detonate their remaining missiles manually. The aliens had never seen anything like it. Colonel Ryan Hughes led boarding parties onto disabled alien vessels, his Marines fighting through corridors in zero gravity, while the aliens struggled to adapt to the three-dimensional combat. The Kresh discovered that their cybernetic advantages meant nothing when humans started using electromagnetic pulse grenades that fried their implants. The Zendari found that their silicon bodies, perfect for their high-gravity world, shattered like glass when hit with specialized rounds designed by Dr. Wells. The turning point came on the third day of battle. Dr. Lisa Grant, who had been analyzing captured alien communication equipment, discovered that all 5 species in the coalition used a shared network for coordination. It made sense from their perspective. Unified command meant better efficiency. But it also meant a single point of failure. Human programmers, including some who had been cybersecurity experts before the war, launched a coordinated attack on the network. They did not try anything sophisticated. They just flooded it with garbage data. Millions of meaningless messages designed to look like valid commands. The alien fleet's coordination collapsed. Ships received orders to move to positions that did not exist. Squadrons were told to attack targets that were actually their own vessels. Chaos spread through the coalition faster than any weapon could. Admiral Murphy ordered a full offensive during the confusion. Every human ship, every defense platform, every hidden weapon fired at once. The space around Earth and Mars lit up like a supernova. Alien shields, already weakened from days of constant bombardment, began to fail. Capital ships, massive vessels that had ruled the stars for centuries, started to break apart under the assault. Chancellor Trevax, watching his fleet disintegrate around him, made the call to retreat. It was the first time in Velkari history that their forces had withdrawn from a battle against an inferior species. The surviving coalition ships fled toward the edge of the solar system, and the humans let them go. Jake could have ordered pursuit, could have tried to destroy every last enemy vessel, but his own fleet was barely holding together, and Earth needed those ships for defense more than revenge. As the alien fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel and disappeared from sensors, a cheer went up across every human ship and station. They had won. Against all odds, against an enemy with superior numbers and technology, humanity had defended their home. Jake sat in his command chair, exhausted, and looked at the casualty reports streaming across his screen. 2,000 dead, 8,000 wounded, 37 ships destroyed or too damaged to repair. But Earth was still free. Mars was still free. Humanity was still independent. Chris Hayes appeared on his screen, the young pilot's face dirty and tired but grinning. "Admiral, you seeing this? We actually did it. We beat them." The Galactic Council made their declaration of total war with great ceremony. 23 species pledged their fleets, their soldiers, their resources to the elimination of the human threat. High Chancellor Trevax of the Velkari gave a speech that was broadcast across the galaxy, speaking of order and civilization and the need to stamp out chaos before it spread. He called humanity a cancer that needed to be cut out before it infected the rest of the galaxy. President Helen Carter watched the speech from her office in Geneva, where the unified Earth government had established its headquarters. Beside her sat Admiral Murphy, Colonel Hughes, Dr. Wells, and Dr. Grant. They watched in silence as Trevax explained how humanity would be cornered in their solar system, blockaded and slowly starved of resources until they had no choice but to surrender. When the speech ended, Helen turned to her advisors. "They're going to blockade us, cut off any chance of expansion, wait for us to run out of resources. It's actually a smart plan." "It would be," Jake agreed, "if we plan to sit here and wait for them." Helen raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" Jake stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Humanity had changed so much in just 6 months. Every person on Earth now understood they were part of something bigger, that their survival depended on working together. The old divisions of nation and ideology had not disappeared, but they had been set aside in the face of an external threat. "We're suggesting we don't wait to be attacked," Colonel Hughes said, picking up where Jake had left off. "We go on the offensive, hit them where they don't expect it, make them defend instead of attack." Dr. Wells pulled up a holographic display showing a map of the nearby galaxy. We've been analyzing the captured alien technology. We figured out the basics of faster-than-light travel. It's crude, our ships can barely manage it, but it works. We can leave the solar system now. And go where? Helen asked. We don't have allies. We don't have supply bases. We'd be alone out there. Dr. Grant smiled, the expression of someone who had figured out a puzzle. That's the thing, President Carter. We wouldn't be alone. The Galactic Council is not as unified as they pretend. We've been monitoring their communications, studying their history. There are dozens of species under Council rule who are not there by choice. They were conquered, subjugated, forced to join. If we could reach them, offer them an alternative, we might find allies. Helen was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. What they were suggesting was risky beyond measure. Sending human ships into unknown space, trying to forge alliances with species they had never met, all while being hunted by the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Do it, she finally said. Operation Outreach. Find us some friends because God knows we need them. Captain Sophie Blake stood on the bridge of the stealth ship Ghost Protocol and felt the strange sensation of faster-than-light travel for the first time. The universe seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, colors shifting through spectrums that human eyes were not designed to see. Then suddenly they were somewhere else. The solar system was 20 light-years behind them, and they were in orbit around a water world covered in green oceans. This was Yanar, home of the Yanari people. According to captured council records, the Yanari had been conquered by the Velkari 3 centuries ago and forced into servitude. They were engineers and builders, their aquatic cities providing much of the infrastructure for Velkari expansion. Sophie opened a communication channel, hoping the translation program Dr. Grant had designed would work. Yanari people, this is Captain Sophie Blake of Earth. We know you are under Velkari control. We're here to offer you an alternative. The response came faster than expected. A face appeared on the screen. Humanoid, but with gill slits on the neck and large eyes adapted for underwater vision. The translator rendered the voice as female. You are the humans. We have heard of your battles. The Velkari say you are dangerous criminals. The Velkari attacked us without provocation, Sophie said. We defended ourselves. Now they've declared war on us and we're looking for allies. People who are tired of council rule, who want to be free. The Yanari was silent for a moment. The Velkari have orbital weapons platforms aimed at our cities. If we rebel, they will destroy everything. Sophie felt a surge of anger at the casual cruelty of it. What if those weapons platforms were gone? What if you had a chance to fight back? Another pause, longer this time. Then we would take that chance. But humans, you are one small ship. How can you help us? Sophie smiled. Who said we were alone? The Ghost Protocol was not alone. Following behind, traveling more slowly because they were using older human engines, was a small fleet of 10 ships carrying Colonel Hughes and 2,000 Marines. They had been following Sophie's path through a series of calculated jumps, staying hidden but ready to act. The operation was brutally efficient. Human ships approached the Velkari orbital platforms from unexpected angles. Using the same chaotic tactics that had worked at Sol, the Velkari garrison, used to subjugated species who obeyed orders, was not prepared for an assault. Within 6 hours, the platforms were destroyed or captured, and the Yanari were free. The Yanari did not waste time. Within days, they had mobilized their own forces, using their engineering skills to retrofit human weapons onto their ships. They sent delegations to other subjugated species, spreading the word that humanity was offering freedom to anyone willing to fight for it. Meanwhile, Admiral Murphy was conducting his own campaign in the solar system. The Council had sent blockade fleets expecting to trap humanity. Instead, human wolf packs hunted the blockaders. Commander Ben Foster, promoted after his defense of Europa, led a squadron of frigates that specialized in hit-and-run attacks. They would jump into a system, destroy a supply ship, and jump out before the enemy could respond. The aliens' rigid command structure worked against them. They had procedures for everything, protocols that had to be followed. Human commanders made decisions in seconds, adapting to changing situations with a speed that baffled the Council's military. When the rules said to do one thing, humans did the opposite. When logic suggested retreat, they attacked. When they should have defended, they scattered and struck from unexpected angles. Dr. Wells made another breakthrough when he managed to fully reverse engineer alien faster-than-light drives. The new human ships were still slower than alien vessels, still cruder in design, but they worked. And more importantly, they were cheaper and easier to build. For every ship the Council destroyed, humanity could build 3 more. The first human ship to jump beyond the solar system was the explorer vessel Pathfinder, commanded by Captain Eric Stone with Dr. Maya Torres as his science officer. They followed coordinates the Archeons had left at an abandoned outpost, finding a dead world at the edge of known space. On that world was a structure, ancient and crumbling, with a message in a format that human computers could read. The message was a star chart, showing over 100 systems marked with a symbol. Dr. Torres worked to translate it, and when she succeeded, she felt her breath catch. Each mark indicated a species that had been conquered or subjugated by the Council. The Archeons had given humanity a map of potential allies. Eric immediately sent the data back to Earth, and President Carter authorized an expansion of Operation Outreach. 50 ships, the largest fleet humanity could spare, set out to make contact with these species. Some rejected the humans, too afraid of Council reprisal, but others listened. The Chirics, insectoid beings who had been enslaved for their hive mind coordination abilities, joined immediately. The Stones, silicon-based life forms who had been mining their own planets to death under Council orders, pledged their allegiance. Within 6 months, humanity had forged an alliance of 47 species. They called themselves the Free Coalition, and they fought with a desperation that surprised even the humans. These were species who had lived under oppression for decades or centuries, who had given up hope of freedom. Now they had a chance, and they were not going to waste it. The turning point in the wider war came at the Battle of Krenth Station, a massive shipyard where the Council was building new vessels. The Free Coalition attacked with everything they had. Human ships led the charge, but they were supported by Yenari engineering vessels that could disable enemy shields, Chirix fighters that moved in perfect coordination, and stone bombardment cruisers that cracked through armor with particle beams. The battle lasted 3 days and ended with the destruction of 30 capital ships that were under construction. It was the largest loss the Council had suffered in over 1,000 years. More importantly, it sent a message to the galaxy. Humanity was not fighting alone anymore, and they were winning. On Nexus Prime, the Council met in emergency session. Species that had been confident in victory 6 months ago now spoke in worried tones about resource shortages and military setbacks. The Krenth Empire, humiliated by the loss of their primary shipyard, shocked everyone by sending a message to Earth. Commander Vorath, the same Krenth who had attacked Europa, appeared on screens across human space. His translator box made his voice sound almost respectful. Humans of Earth, the Krenth Empire acknowledges. 2 years had passed since the war began. The galaxy was unrecognizable from the ordered, peaceful place it had pretended to be. Trade routes were disrupted. Entire sectors had declared independence from the Council. Species that had been enemies for centuries were now fighting side by side in the Free Coalition. And at the center of it all was humanity, the species that no one had taken seriously. Admiral Jake Murphy stood on the bridge of the Independence, looking at the massive fleet assembled around his flagship. 200 human ships, the entire combat strength of Earth's military. But they were not alone. 500 ships from 47 different species floated in formation, all bearing the symbol of the Free Coalition, a circle of stars representing unity and diversity. They were going to attack Nexus Prime, the heart of Council power. It was madness. The station was protected by the most advanced defense systems in the galaxy, surrounded by a permanent fleet of 300 warships. Even with the Free Coalition's numbers, the odds were not good. But Jake had learned something in 2 years of warfare. Odds did not matter as much as will. The Council's forces fought because they were ordered to, because they feared punishment for disobedience. The Free Coalition fought for their freedom, for the right to exist without masters. That made all the difference. President Carter had authorized the mission with one condition. Jake had to meet with the Archeons first. After 2 years of silence, the ancient species had finally responded to human messages, inviting Jake, Dr. Grant, and Dr. Wells to their homeworld. The Archeon homeworld was beautiful beyond description. a planet of crystal spires and floating gardens, where the very air seemed to shimmer with colors that human eyes could barely process. The Archeans themselves greeted the human delegation with what seemed like satisfaction. The eldest Archeon, the same crystalline being who had warned the Council about humanity, spoke directly into their minds. "You have done well, Commander Murphy." "Better than we hoped," Jake felt confused. "You hoped for this? For war?" "We hoped for change," the Archeon corrected. The Galactic Council had become stagnant, corrupt. Species were held down not through merit but through the accident of being discovered early or late. The strong dominated the weak, not through honor but through simple military might. It was a system that could not last forever, but it would have lasted another 1,000 years without a catalyst. Dr. Grant stepped forward. "You knew we would fight. That's why you warned them about us. You wanted them to attack us." The Archeon's colors shifted to something that might have been amusement. "We gave them fair warning. What they did with that warning was their choice. But yes, we knew humans would not surrender. We saw it in your history, in your legends, in the way you celebrated your defeats as much as your victories. You value the struggle itself, not just the outcome. That made you unique." Dr. Wells was looking at a holographic display the Archeons had provided, showing the current state of the galaxy. "You've been helping us. The star charts, the information about subjugated species, the technical data we found at your outposts. You've been guiding us. We gave you the tools," the Archeon said. "What you built with them was your choice. And you chose to build alliances, to free the oppressed, to fight not just for your own survival but for the freedom of others. That is why you will win, Commander Murphy. Not because you have the best weapons or the most ships, but because you fight for something worth dying for." The Archeon gave them one final gift: detailed plans of Nexus Prime's defenses, including weaknesses that the Council did not know existed. With that information, Jake planned the attack. The Battle of Nexus Prime began at dawn, though dawn had no meaning in space. The Free Coalition fleet jumped into the system in 3 waves, each appearing from a different direction. The Council's defense fleet moved to intercept, following standard tactics that had worked for centuries. The first wave, led by Yanari engineering ships, launched an electromagnetic pulse that disrupted the station's automated defenses. The second wave, commanded by Chiric's hive-mind coordinators, engaged the defense fleet in a massive dogfight that filled space with energy fire and explosions. The third wave, with Jake and the Independents at its center, pushed straight for the station itself. Colonel Ryan Hughes led the ground assault with 10,000 Marines from a dozen different species. They breached the station through cargo airlocks, fighting through corridors against Council security forces. The station was enormous, large enough to hold 1 million beings, and the fighting was brutal and close. Human Marines discovered that their zero-gravity combat training gave them an advantage in the station's varied environments. When they fought Velkari in the high-gravity sections, they struggled. But in zero-gravity corridors, they moved like dancers while the Velkari floundered. The Yanari provided support in flooded sections, while the Chirics fought in swarms through the ventilation systems. In space, the battle was not going well. The Council's defense fleet was losing, but slowly. For every Council ship destroyed, 2 Coalition vessels were taken out. Captain Sophie Blake, commanding a squadron of stealth ships, managed to disable 3 capital ships by targeting their power cores, but she lost half her squadron doing it. Lieutenant Chris Hayes, now a squadron commander himself, led the fighter screen protecting the Independents. His pilots fought with desperate skill, knowing that if the flagship was destroyed, the entire attack would collapse. When a Velkari cruiser broke through the line and launched missiles at the Independents, Chris personally flew his fighter into the missile path, using his ship's point defense to destroy them before they could hit. His fighter was crippled in the process, spinning away into space, but he had done his job. The turning point came when Dr. Maya Torres, working from a science vessel near the edge of the battle, discovered something unexpected. The Council's defense network was not fully automated. It was controlled by a central command center on the station, where Velkari officers coordinated everything. If that center could be taken, the entire defense system would collapse. Jake immediately sent the information to Colonel Hughes, who was fighting 3 levels away from the command center. Hughes gathered his best Marines and launched an assault that would be studied in military academies for generations. They fought through reinforced doors, through ambushes, through corridors filled with gas and fire, Sergeant Lisa Yang, a combat medic, kept the team alive through wounds that should have been fatal. Private Kevin Brooks, barely 20 years old, held a doorway alone for 5 minutes while the rest of the team advanced, killing or driving back 30 enemy soldiers before reinforcements arrived. When they finally reached the command center, they found it defended by the Valkyries' best guards. The firefight lasted only 3 minutes but felt like hours. Hughes himself was wounded, taking an energy blast to his shoulder that would have killed him if his armor had not absorbed most of the impact. But they won. The command center fell, and Hughes transmitted the access codes to Dr. Torres. In seconds, the station's defenses went dark. The automated guns stopped firing. The shield generators shut down. The Council fleet, suddenly realizing they were on their own, began to retreat. Jake should have ordered pursuit. Should have destroyed every Council ship that fled. But he remembered what the Archeon had told him about fighting for something worth dying for. Mercy, he decided, could be as powerful as violence. All ships cease fire, he ordered. Let them go. The Council forces fled, and the Free Coalition took control of Nexus Prime. The Galactic Council, meeting in emergency session in a backup facility, voted to surrender. High Chancellor Trevax, looking ancient and defeated, appeared on screens across the galaxy to announce the end of the war. The Council acknowledges the sovereignty of the Free Coalition, he said, his voice empty of its former arrogance. We will negotiate terms for a peaceful resolution to this conflict. The negotiations took 6 months. Representatives from every species met at Nexus Prime, which had been transformed from a symbol of oppression to a symbol of cooperation. President Carter led the human delegation, with Jake and Dr. Grant as advisors. The terms were simple but revolutionary. The old council was dissolved. A new galactic assembly would be formed, with equal representation for all species regardless of their size or military strength. Conquered species would be freed. Reparations would be paid to those who had suffered under council rule. And most importantly, aggression against other species was banned, enforced not by a single dominant power but by the collective will of the entire galaxy. Not every species agreed. The Valkyrie withdrew to their homeworld, bitter and defeated. A few others followed them, choosing isolation over cooperation, but most species, seeing the alternative, chose to join the new order. The Krenth Empire, true to their word, honored their truce with humanity and became one of the strongest supporters of the new assembly. Commander Vorath, now an ambassador, explained it simply. We respect the humans because they beat us fairly, and we respect this new order because it was won through strength, not given through weakness. 5 years after the war ended, Jake Murphy retired from military service. He had spent enough time fighting. It was time for others to build the